This is the Investor Mindset Podcast, and I'm Steven Pesavento. And for as long as I can remember, I've been obsessed with understanding how we can think better, how we can be better, and how we can do better. And each episode, we explore lessons on motivation and mindset from the most successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. All right, guys, welcome back to the Investor Mindset Podcast. I am very excited for another show. We have John Martinez in the studio today. John, how you doing?
Hey, Steven, what's going on, man? Doing well.
John has been in some form of sales training for over 20 years and has become the premier trainer in the industry for real estate investors. With the help of his team, he's trained thousands of entrepreneurs on how to boost company income by helping them improve their inbound and outbound sales. He's done so by perfecting the face-to-face and over-the-phone tactics from his 20 years of experience in sales. He personally has worked with my team and has trained them on to be amazing salespeople. And I'm really excited to share him with the amazing audience today on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Well, so you've obviously hit some success. You've really been able to help a lot of folks on the sales training side. But if we take a look back, what events or influences from your childhood shaped who you are today?
Yeah, great question. You know, my childhood was not what people would expect from a sales trainer. Usually when people think of sales trainers, they think about people who are just naturally outgoing and life of the party, tons of friends. I was not that way. I actually was, I kept to myself. I had some issues with my speech. So I was in some pretty intensive speech therapy up until the 6th or 7th grade. Because no one understood me, I just didn't talk because it was embarrassing. I was a late bloomer. So, I graduated high school, I think at 101 pounds. So I was picked on and stuff like that. I played football 7th, 8th, and then 9th grade in high school. And when I say small, I was so small that they had no equipment in the high school that would fit me. They had to special order all my gear so I could stand on the sidelines all year. So needless to say, man, I was an introvert. I hid from everyone. I didn't talk to a soul. And I think, that influenced me one very big way. The best way to put it, and I hate to even say this, is I've had a chip on my shoulder. I think I really had something to prove about what I could accomplish and what I could become, and what I could do with my life since I was always, kind of a picked on and overlooked and that type of stuff.
Yeah, well, I can only imagine, John. For people who aren't watching the video stream here, you're a big guy. You're not like a little tiny. I mean, to hear you say you're 110 pounds in high school,
yeah,
it's small.
Yeah, it was small. It was very, very small, man. Late bloomer. I didn't start growing until I was about 18 years old.
And so what was it like growing up having some of those challenges, right? Speech therapy, maybe feeling a little bit out of place, feeling like you really wanted to look inside for energy rather than outside because you weren't getting it there. What was that like?
Yeah, I remember, for as long as I can remember, playing kind of these games with myself. And I've never told a soul about this. These words have never left my mouth before. But I remember playing games with myself where I would test my mental toughness, where I would just, I'd be in terrible situations all the time. And to me, it was a game. Can I get through this? Can I endure this? How long can I do this or that? And it was always a sense of accomplishment when I got through a bigger and bigger and bigger challenge. So, I've never told a soul about that, but I do remember turning it into a game in my head. And I don't know if that was a coping mechanism of some kind. I don't know what it was. Honestly, I haven't thought about it in years. Something about your question just triggered that. But
you were doing mental training to train your mind yourself. Just you didn't think, it doesn't sound like you thought of it like that,
no.
But you were challenging yourself to get stronger. What for?
I have no idea. I guess just to cope. I was always so embarrassed and I was always so afraid that to the extent that even when my parents would have family and friends over to the house, I would hide under the furniture until they left. So I know it's pretty messed up, but that was my childhood. So I think it was probably out of necessity. Now that I'm thinking about it, I knew those tough times were coming, so I would turn it into a game, and then I was really proud of myself. Again, every time I had an accomplishment or I won that game and I got through a tougher and tougher moment. So I guess those things are born out of necessity. It's kind of funny talking about, because like I said, I haven't thought about this in years. And I've never brought it up to anybody.
Well, it sounds like we're really uncovering something that I think we can debunk a myth here, that salespeople are only successful if they're extroverted and they're kind of that super outgoing, talkative type person. You sound like, and I know you personally, the exact opposite of that. And you never know when you're on stage or when we're just talking right here. What was it that got you into sales? Because it seems like the opposite type of environment where you really want to thrive.
Yeah, it was that need to accomplish. When I got into sales, I was, I think it was my late teens, early 20s. And at the time, I was a delivery boy. I was delivering food for a catering company. And I would see, I deliver food to doctors' offices, pharmaceutical reps, salespeople basically would order food, and then I deliver it. And when the doctor would come out to eat the bagel or whatever, they would try to sell their product. So my vision of what success looked like was influenced by that. I saw these people, they had the company cars, they were well-dressed, a lot. And I saw those people, and I thought to myself, that must be what success looks like. And they're salespeople. So that was my influence to as I put it back in the day, get a real job. That was my biggest influence. Is I had something to prove, and that looked like the vehicle, the outlet.
You saw these examples of people who had it. You were a delivery boy. You had something behind you where you needed to be able to provide for your family, and you thought, well, you know, those guys are making what I want to be making. I want to be able to provide like that. So I'm going to kind of head down that path. It seems like potentially that introverted side, that kind of researcher, I'm going to really think through and strategize, is probably what really led you to being so successful at sales and at being an incredible sales trainer. How do you think that's played into your career, you know, thus far?
Yeah, I think our success, my success in sales, and I think more importantly, success training other people is relying on process instead of natural ability. Hey, natural ability is great in any aspect of your life. It's going to help you get further quicker. But process, I think, in my mind, is more important than ability, more important than talent. You know, when you look at the greats, like in sports, you know, Jordan, Tiger Woods, Jerry Rice is my all-time favorite football player. These guys would just practice their processes over and over again. And they had a process for training and a process for preparing. And I really, really believe process is what makes great salespeople great. And we actually know it when we look at the data. So, yeah, I guess early on, I did rely on that internal reflection. And today, I think that's what makes our sales training so great, is we're able to teach a process to anyone, whether they're built to sell or not, naturally, that where they can be successful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've personally gone through the training. I've gone through it a lot of times. I've had my whole team go through it. I've, had some consulting from you. And so, we believe in it. I think just maybe to challenge you with the intent of understanding deeper, I've hired some people who we followed the process and they sucked at selling. And how do we end up creating incredible salespeople, using the process? It seems like what I've found is, maybe there's more than just the process. And what have you found there? Right.
So kind of have the same view, but different. I'll explain. It's not strengths that make salespeople. It's a lack of weaknesses. So anyone can learn to sell, but you've got some people that are naturally better at it. They're just built to sell, right? Some people have some things that are really holding them back, kind of like some anchors that they're dragging. And until you cut those anchors and you get rid of those hidden weaknesses, they'll never hit the potential with the process. So basically, salespeople have 5 or 6 hidden weaknesses that will keep them from using the process. So it's not that they're not built or they can't do it. It's that something is holding them back from actually using the process. So my argument would be everybody can sell if they use the process, but there's some things holding some back that prevent them from going through the process and sticking to it.
Yeah, it's always seemed like if somebody doesn't have that internal drive to succeed, like that fire that's burning,
Yeah.
that no matter who they are, it's not gonna work out, because in our industry, at least, it's a very tough type of sale.
Right.
What are 5 or 6 of those hidden weaknesses that you've found that hold people back from being killer sales folks?
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Without motivation, there's really no motivation to change. And if there's no motivation to change, then you're not going to be able to kick those hidden weaknesses and cut those anchors. So motivation is key, because without proper motivation, no one's coachable. So then when we look at the hidden weaknesses, the biggest ones we've seen are non-supportive buy cycle. Non-supportive buy cycle just means the way a salesperson makes purchases on their own is the exact opposite of the way they're supposed to be selling. So there's this internal struggle of, what should I do? Should I sell the way I know I'm supposed to sell? Or do I do what I tell myself is true, the way I buy? So a quick example of this is, if you've got a salesperson, like in your industry, right? You want a quick decision. Hey, we're going to go through the sales process. Yes is good, no is okay too, but we're not leaving with a maybe or a think it over. A salesperson gets to the end, and let's say the salesperson, they never buy, first time they look at something, they go back, they think it over, they take 3 or 4 weeks, they search the internet, they read 100 reviews, they do all that stuff. Let's say that's the salesperson. Well, if the salesperson's in that situation and it's time to close the deal, and the person in front of them, the prospect, says, you know what, John, I really want to think about it and do a little bit more research, that salesperson is going to have a heck of a time, just overriding what they believe, because in their head, they're going, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I do. So that prevents them from going through the process, which would be, hey, anything other than a yes is a no, and that's okay, right? So that's one of the major hidden weaknesses. Another huge one is when salespeople just want to be liked. You see, this is where extroverts get into trouble, actually. Extroverts aren't the best salespeople out there. Some can be great salespeople, but typically they're a very small percentage of the greats, right? And the reason is because extroverts are really good at getting people to like them, right? And if you're really good and you have this drive and you want others to like you, well, sales isn't about people liking you. It's about them respecting you. And sometimes you've got to say things and ask certain questions that are going to make people uncomfortable and challenge people. And if your internal drive is to make people happy and feel good, when it comes time for those challenging questions or statements, there again is going to be that internal struggle. So those are 2 of the biggest. So hopefully that helps the audience understand how these weaknesses kind of drag people back.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I've seen that from salespeople that I've brought on. They're really strong. They want to succeed, but they get in there and they can't make the offer they need to, or they can't bring that person around because they understand, hey, maybe you do need to take some time to think about it. Heck, I'd want to think about it too. So obviously you've had some success at this sales training thing. Talk to me about some of the times that you've ran into some challenges. I know personally a couple of them, right? We've worked together on some of those projects, and life is all about learning and trying some things, and sometimes they don't work out. Tell us a little story about one of those times it didn't work out when you're trying one of these new ventures.
Yeah, first of all, it's just an endless parade of failures. I mean, that's just, if your business is growing, it means you're failing constantly along the way. And I know that is kind of cliche now, and people talk about it a lot, but I think the reason is because it's so 100% completely true. For example, we had a call center. No longer have that call center. We shut it down. So there's a big learning experience. First time we did the call center, we did inbound calls. We learned that was not our strength for a variety of reasons. So we turned to outbound calls. We brought on a partner. We had trouble with the infrastructure. We had trouble with the legal piece of it, staying compliant and learning state and federal laws. We had challenges from attorney generals. And at the end of the day, the business made money and was successful. To the tune of about $30,000 a month was, I think, our profit during about the last 6 months to a year. Wow. But where we did fail is we couldn't get the business to a place where it wasn't impacting us emotionally. Every time my wife would get, she ended up running the company, and every time she'd get a letter from an attorney general, it was 2 or 3 days of just kind of freaking out, and that impacted our marriage and our life, and neither of us felt good about it. So we failed to get to the business to the point where we were emotionally disengaged and out of it to the extent where we did not need to be involved in any of the operations at all. So, which is kind of funny because a lot of people think success in business is just the financial piece. But it was taking too much time, and there's too much emotional engagement there for us to consider it successful. So we ultimately shut it down.
Yeah, which is so surprising, right? Because when you hear somebody, I'm going to shut down a business, it's usually because, well, they've been putting a lot into it. And, frankly, it's just not coming out the back end. They're not making the kind of money. But it sounds like you were actually making the money, but it just wasn't a business that felt good to run.
Right. It stunk. And in the bigger scheme of things, we had other businesses. The sales training business, for example, did somewhere around 5 times revenue and took about 1/10 of the time. So you also start looking at that stuff like, hey, why am I spending, 90% of my time to make, 20 or 30% of our income? And you have to start reprioritizing and doubling down on the stuff that's working. So yeah, it's really weird. People, again, think about success only by the financial terms, but I know a lot of people who are financially just miserable. So I think my definition has changed over the years of what success looks like.
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite questions. So since you mentioned it, tell me, what does success look like to you?
Yeah, so to me, success just is freedom of choice, right? And in order to be free to choose anything you want, you need to have time freedom, right? You need to have the time to do what you want to do. You need to have the resources. So there is a financial component in my book. You need the time and the resources. And as long as you have those two things, I believe you have total freedom, right? If you've got all the time in the world to do what you want and the resources to actually accomplish it, do it, put it into action, then that's freedom to me. So that definition can be the same as a lot of people's definition, but the variables are how much time do you need to feel free? How much money or resources do you need to feel free? And my answer is going to be different than everyone else's, but I really think time and money are the two essential components to success.
Of course. And time and resources are the key. And, with that definition, do you feel like you've hit success? You feel like you're successful?
Yeah, I do. Except now that I've hit that for a little while, because it takes 2 to 3 hours a week to run the business. It's a 7-figure business. So when we live in the Midwest where it does not cost much to live at all. So most of the money nowadays just goes into savings and reinvesting into new business ideas. But that definition is slowly changing because as I have more time and freedom, I'm getting bored. So that's why we spring up new businesses. So, not just having the freedom to choose to do what you want to do when you want to do it, but there needs to be some other fulfilling component somewhere in there where the activities you're doing actually have some type of fulfillment, something that makes you happy, something that lets you know you're giving back, helping others. So again, I think for me at least, it's been a journey where my definition continues to change. And I think in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it's going to continue to change too. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy, right? You hit that first level, then you go to the second until you get to the very top. And the very top is very different from the bottom of that hierarchy.
So really now we've even just improved on our definition.
Right.
So time freedom, money and resources, but then also having that fulfillment piece. Because once you've reached those two pieces, all of a sudden, well, great, now I've got all this money. I want to do something that makes me really feel fulfilled inside. So I think that's really great. And it sounds like you've built this incredible business. You're feeling free. You've hit success. Do you ever feel like a fear of going back to that life that you had before where you weren't sure exactly where the money was going to come from and you weren't sure if you're going to...
For a long time I did. For a very long time I did. The only time that changed is when I finally realized I've got the skill set. I've learned that I have the tools. I've learned the skill sets to build and to create and to identify opportunity. And once you do that, you stop being afraid. Now where my thoughts used to be, just like you said, hey, what if people stop buying? What if the business goes downhill? What, for whatever reason, what if we lose it all? And I was scared to death. But now the way I think is no big deal. There's so much opportunity out there. We'll just build another business. We'll do it again and again and again because we know the building blocks. We have the tools. It's just a different widget we'd be building.
Yeah. So somebody could take everything that you've built away, but you know that you have the skills within yourself to go and recreate it again and again and again.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I think all of our listeners, we're all driving at different levels on that success matrix, on that pyramid that we're talking about. I remember feeling like if I could only make $10,000, man, that would feel good. I'd be successful. And then you make it and you're like, well, if I could only make $100,000, and then you make it and you have to just keep moving that goalpost. And then you realize that the money is critical, but there's so much more to it. And so for all those folks listening, I really hope that you'll take that to heart, that no matter where you are, just know that there's always another place to grow to. There's always another place that you can move your focus to really get more for yourself. But really, it comes down to what you're doing for others. And you can see as John's hit success training all these other people, now he's really moving in that direction of trying to find some more fulfillment in what he's doing.
Absolutely, man.
So one of the questions I have for you, John, is, you're working on a business, only takes you 3 or 4 hours a week to do, to keep it running. You must have some habits in place. What are some of your keystone habits that help you live a great life every single day?
Yeah, I do. And I am definitely a creature of habit. It's one reason why I don't like to travel, because it breaks my routine. So my habit is 7 days a week. I get up. I don't use an alarm clock anymore because I'm getting old and getting used to waking up early, but I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and I head out to the gym. I do that 7 days a week because I just don't feel right if I don't go to the gym. I enjoy it, and I've done it for so many years now that it's one of those things that if you miss it, you just feel weird. So that's how I start every single day. I work in the morning hours. I'm no good in the afternoon. I've learned that about myself. For whatever reason, I'm not effective after lunch. So any work I have to do, any important projects, I knock out in between when my wife takes the kids to school and when I take my wife to lunch. So that's the other thing we do every day is my wife and I have lunch together. So usually not at home. We usually go out to eat, and we'll sit down and we'll take an hour and a half and have a really nice lunch and just hang out together. And that gives us some time together. And that's basically it. I guess, well, maybe it's right at the end of the day. There's another one. After my wife puts the kids down to bed about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, we both climb into bed and we kind of watch TV and joke around and chat. And we spend that final hour of the day or so together before we fall asleep.
And when you're doing that daily lunch, you guys work closely together?
Yeah.
You're both working on the same business. Do you have any boundaries set on what you guys talk about there, or is it kind of just a free flowing conversation, whatever comes up, whether you're talking about business or the kids?
Yeah, it's just free flowing. We don't have any rules set up. I don't feel like we need any. So, and sometimes we like to talk about business, and it's just in a different setting. And sometimes talking about business in a different setting beyond my home office where I'm sitting right now really helps as well. So whatever we feel like talking about, we talk about.
Absolutely. So, a lot of our listeners are maybe existing salespeople. A lot of our listeners are people who are always looking to grow. What would you recommend if somebody wants to get better at sales? And sales just comes down to being able to communicate and give people what they want and help them understand it. What would you recommend, maybe a couple steps that they can do in order to become a better salesperson? Where can they look for some education? Where can they start practicing some of these skills so that they can grow within themselves to be, a killer salesperson like yourself?
Right. So one of the most influential books I've read that has a huge impact on the training we do today was Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. So that's a book. You could get it on Audible or whatever. Just listen to it if you don't like to read. But it has the core fundamentals of what makes successful salespeople successful. And it was eye-opening to me. I think if you haven't read it or aren't familiar with the process, it will be eye-opening to you too. Where do you practice those things, though? Once you see what makes a successful salesperson, and it's really the questions they ask, then you can ask those questions anywhere, because it is about deeper communication. So I remember when I first started practicing different questioning strategies, it would be with the customer service person on the phone, with the waiter or waitress at the restaurant, with family members, because it was very natural. And I had an easier time doing that than waiting until I was in a sales situation to practice, because when you're in that sales situation, you feel like everything's on the line. And I at least had a very hard time experimenting in those situations. Especially in the sales I came from was B2B sales, where you spent 90% of your time prospecting and 10% actually selling. So I just did the same stuff all the time when I was selling, until I got comfortable with the new questioning technique or strategy or something like that.
So you'd kind of learn one thing, you'd get really, really good at it. You'd keep using it kind of throughout your life, throughout, conversations at the store, conversations with, a partner, maybe at work, until you get really comfortable with it, and then maybe add another skill on top of that.
That was exactly it. It was about comfort for me. And as you said, sales is about communication. The way I always explain it is, if we could read people's minds, we could sell them anything, because we could look right inside and say, hey, this is every reason why this person would do business with me. This is everything that might hold them back. And you'd know exactly what to talk about and walk through. So when you get really good at communication, it's just like mind reading. It's hey, let's blog about every reason why we might do business together, every reason why we might not. We'll lay them out all on the table and just figure out what works best for you.
Yeah. Well, and that style of sales, I think, John, is really, it's incredible for a couple reasons, because a lot of people think the salesperson is the person who's they're coming in hot, they're aggressive, they're slamming it down that person's throat, and they're going to get a yes or a no. Fine, say no, that's fine too. I'm going to move on to the next one. But really, your sales is different. Will you kind of tell us what that style is and what it's all about?
Yeah, it's really facilitating the decision process. If you read Spin Selling, and there's just a variety of other studies, countless studies that have been done over the years, the more you try to pressure somebody into something, or in sales, the more you try to close them, the less likely you are to get that result. And it's due to something called psychological reactance and a couple other factors about it. It shuts down communication, essentially. So since we know pressure and closing hard and all those types of things aren't effective, we have to look at what is effective. And what is effective is really questioning strategies that have to do with how is a problem that someone is experiencing, or a situation that they're in, or a product that they have or don't have, how is that impacting like their real life, what they think about, how they feel? Is it getting in the way of goals? And until you take the conversation to that personal level, and I don't care what type of sales it is, until you get to that personal level, it's really hard to move the needle or move the ball down the field. So the most successful people ask questions to uncover those things. And once they uncover those things that are important to the individual or the group they're talking to, they simply position their product or service into, hey, now that we know, where you are and where to be, let me kind of build the bridge with our product or service. And all you have to do is walk over that bridge, and that's going to get you to where you want to be. So, that's kind of vague and high level, but in a nutshell, that's our style of sales.
And what I love about it is it works. It really works. I'm a pretty tenacious guy. I definitely come in hot. I had to really learn how to kind of sit back. And I still have challenge with that from time to time, both in sales and in personal life and in leadership. Sometimes when you're an achiever and you're driven and, just with my personality style, I want to do it. Let's get it done, baby. Let's get in there. Boom. But what advice would you give to somebody who is normally used to just kind of like pushing things through, forcing things to happen, and that's what's worked so well for success? How do they roll that back so they can be more empathetic, they can listen, and they can hear, and they don't necessarily take it personal when a prospect says, I think your company's trying to do the wrong thing,
Yeah. So if they have that natural tendency to go hard, what you want to do is really just change the definition of what a successful sales call is. So if I'm working with the salesperson like that, I would say, hey, the goal is not to sell this person because you're going to go way too fast and way too hard for the yes. And that's going to really short circuit everything we want to do. So let's instead, you've got 10 sales calls this week. Let's see who you can legitimately disqualify. And in order to disqualify them, you're going to have to ask them these questions. And if they are disqualified, we're going to get them there. But what will happen, what happens in reality, is a number of those people, they can't disqualify. And by default, that ends up in a sale. So I want them to use that same tenacity, but I want them to use that tenacity to disqualify. And what that'll do is it'll relieve all the sales pressure that they typically put onto people. It's going to expand the conversation. And as they're going for the no, for the right fit, for the prospects that are a good fit for the product or service, they're not going to let it get to a no. They'll end up fighting for the yes until the salesperson finally gives up and says, fine, you win. Let's do this.
Wow. I love that. I love that. So really it's just changing the way that they're looking at it. So instead of fighting to get them to sign that contract to say, yeah, I'm going to buy from you, it's really with that tenaciousness to really dig in and listen and understand and be present so that you can understand, am I really able to help this person or not?
Yeah. I mean, to disqualify, I would say, hey, you've got these 5 or 6 questions, and until you get the answer to these questions, they're not disqualified. That would force the asking of the questions, the answers, and by default, they would run a pretty successful sales call.
That's strong. I just had to take a little pause there for myself to take that in. What would 5 of those questions be for a home buyer?
Yeah, so we'd probably start pretty surface layer and just ask something like, hey, what motivated you to meet with me today? Or why did you even start thinking about this? When did you start thinking about, making this change? Just very surface layer stuff to start the conversation, to build a little rapport and to kind of peek into where things are going. And then everything past that is basically going to be going a little bit deeper. So that's what we call problem questions. But you could do the exact opposite too. We call it picture perfect questions, which is, hey, kind of paint me the picture. Tell me where you want to be in a month or 6 months from now. Where, why there? What would it be like? How would it be different from your situation now? Essentially what those questions do, the problem in the picture perfect questions, is they help the prospect get really clear about, hey, where am I trying to go? What am I trying to accomplish here, right? Where am I now and where do I want to be? And to make that really impactful, to take it to a personal level, whether you ask just problem questions, just picture perfect questions, or what really good salespeople do and ask both of those types of questions, you ask impact questions, which really is just, how does that impact you? Why that? Why then? What made you think about that? Why would that be good? Why would that be bad? How do you feel about that? And just going deeper and deeper. And those questions could be really simple, like, really? Right? Just to keep people talking and going deeper on their own. They don't have to be, well thought out, long, perfectly worded questions. Usually when I ask impact questions, it might start with a problem question like, hey, kind of tell me about what brought me out here today. How long have you been thinking about selling your home? Mm-hmm. And after they answer, I might just say something like, wow, really? And then they keep talking. So those could be impact questions. So really there's 3 types of questions: problem, impact, picture perfect. You just run over those over and over in a combination until you start to hear some type of emotional impact, like how they're feeling, like, I've just been stressed out, or, I'm just kind of tired of this, or, man, it would be so awesome if we could fill in the blank here. Mm-hmm. That's where you want to get your prospects. So you ask for 5 questions, but really those are the only 3 questions you need to ask, and there's just countless variations of them.
What I think is really something I want to underline here for all the listeners, regardless of industry, regardless of whether you're in sales, if you're still listening, which I hope you are, is that these things that John is just talking about, they apply to all levels of communication. When you're talking with a spouse, you're really just trying to dive in and understand, well, what's going on. You're hearing that person, you're empathizing, you're understanding what the problem is and the pain that they're experiencing, and then you're hopefully either providing a solution or just being a good listener, right? This stuff really, it's applicable across disciplines. And I'm sure you've seen that. That's probably why you've been, how long have you and your wife been married, John?
We've been married going on 6 years now.
That's amazing. That's really great. So before we get into the final section of the show, John, you have built this incredible training business. You've tried and succeeded at many, and you've failed at so many other types of businesses that you've done. Why do you think you've been successful at this, and what does it take to be successful in the training industry? What have you done differently that's made you be able to rise over all the other people who've stopped or given up?
Right. I think the biggest, where I've seen the biggest jumps in our business, where I've seen the most improvement, has been where I put on blinders and I trust in my gut. I spent a lot of my time trying to emulate what I thought was the right thing to do, looking at other people in the industry who were coaching, looking at other sales trainers, and trying to be them and do what they do. And I'd occasionally stumble on success when I did something just out of the box. And over the years, I've learned to trust more and more in my gut. And I think what that's done is we do things now that others don't. That sets the brand apart, that sets us apart. We take risks and experiment, which oftentimes, whether you win or lose, leads to learning and growing. So I think the biggest change in my business, where we've seen the most success, is where we've just turned off listening to everyone else. I mean, there's a lot to be said about mimicking those who are already successful. And that gets you to where they are. But when you want to get past them, then you've got to start, putting on the blinders, trusting in your gut and experimenting. So I caught up to people quick, but then we stalled out for personally. That's when we kind of had this last, couple years of pretty substantial growth.
And what were those things that you did differently than everyone else?
A lot of stuff with marketing. So the messaging, what we give away, how we give it away, what we're willing to put out there and give away for free, not worrying so much about, image. A lot of times, a lot of people, I did a coaching workshop this last week, and there were 7 coaches in the room, all very successful. And, we started talking about content, content marketing and how we grow a following. And everyone was like, I don't want to be that guy, but I feel like I got to buy the Lamborghini and slick back the hair and like be that person to be successful, because that's all I see. And I know those guys are successful. And we had a pretty good conversation about, hey, that's them. When they are successful doing that, that's because they're being authentic to themselves and it comes through. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is the same thing, be authentic. And when you're authentic, you're going to be different. And some people are just going to gravitate towards you. They're going to say, yes, I like that. I get that. This is real. So, I'm not bad-mouthing anyone with the Lamborghinis. I love cars. But what I'm saying is those people who have that type of marketing and are successful, it's because that's who they are. They're not faking it. Sometimes people try to fake it and they're not successful. So I think at the end game is the one true piece here is being authentic to yourself is what wins. And it took me a while to get comfortable with myself and to really just be authentic with who I am. In my videos, I'm always wearing the same t-shirt or pullover because, hey, that's me. I'm a simple dude. And that's okay. So authenticity rules in my book.
And how do people find their authentic self? How did you go about finding it and feeling comfortable with it? Because a lot of people, they look around and they think, hey, well, I need a model in order to be successful. I've done it myself. But truly, you got to reach down within yourself and be authentic, but sometimes it's hard to know how. So how have you done it?
Yeah, I think for me, I was just burnt out. I tried so many things. I tried to copy so many people. I tried to be so many things, and it never felt good if I didn't feel like I was being true to myself. So honestly, I think I hit a point where I gave up. I gave up, and I just said, hey, if people don't like me, then they don't like me. And the funny thing is since I can't pinpoint when that was, but since that's happened, we have a bigger and a more driven following because people can relate to you. People like to be around people like themselves. So it's easier to attract the people I want to attract by being authentic. But honestly, I know this is about success and never giving up, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think I gave up And it was one of those failures that turned into an aha moment.
That's a huge takeaway right there, John, is that, successful people, we hit a wall. Sometimes we run into some stuff and we say, man, I don't want to keep doing this anymore. I can't keep this up. And then, what ended up falling out of that was your true self. And you just went forward the way that it needed to be. So we've made it to the growth rapid fire round where the questions are quick, but the answers don't need to be.
Okay.
What's a book that's impacted your life the most, or one that you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, impact, hands down, Richard Branson, Screw It, Let's Do It. So many people, including myself, think about things way too much instead of taking action. And that book is just story after story about getting to a certain point and saying to yourself, you know what, I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but screw it, let's do it. And I really think that is the one thing that ties all successful people together is they take action.
I am going to add that to my reading list right now. That sounds like an amazing book. From an inspiration standpoint, who are some of your mentors, the people that you learn from or you look up to, and how have they influenced your career?
Yeah, my dad early on, about not giving up, he was my biggest influence about not giving up. I remember one of the first stories I ever remember my dad telling me was when he was a kid growing up in Fresno. And there were gangs, and the leader of a gang was picking on him and wanted to fight him. And my dad fought him, and he got his butt kicked. And he told me about how this went on day after day for about a week. And every time he went and he got his butt kicked and he lost. But then after about a week, the guy he was fighting said, Lance, no more. Like, I've had enough. Like, he earned the respect and he beat him up just a little by little enough through perseverance until the other gave up. So that's, fighting is not, a great example, but that is one story that has shaped me that, hey, even if you lose over and over again, the one who never gives up is the one that ends up winning. And I've heard that from business leaders and everyone else I deem to be successful at this point in my life. It's always the same. Just don't give up, and you will end up triumphing.
Triumph. That's what it comes down to. Never give up. Just keep on fighting. So finally, from a purpose perspective, John, why do you do what you do? And what drives you to live your best life every day?
Other people. And I'll tell you again, I'm just being completely open, honest, and vulnerable here. When I got into, running my own business, it was for completely different reasons. It was for material things. It was to feed my ego. There was nothing, pretty about it. It was all me all the time. That's when I started. Nowadays, the reason why I work very little in my business, the reason why we found out how to put the right systems and processes in place, the reason why we've had all that growth, I think is because the reason has become my family, my immediate and extended family, spending more time with my kids, developing a deeper relationship with my wife. And then little by little, that's expanding into a wider circle. And I think that circle is going to continue to expand, where I get most of my joy not out of the money I earn, but the people I help and the people who, shoot me messages on social media about how we've impacted their lives. Now, don't get me wrong. You need a certain amount of money to not worry about money. But after that, I think purpose starts to grow, and it's always the people you care about.
You need the resources in order to fund the mission that you're on, so that you can reach more people. So the money's got to be there,
right?
But it's those little messages that drive it far. Well, John, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. I learned so much, and I'm truly inspired. Where can more folks find out a little bit more about you and get in touch?
Yeah, so our main company website is our company's Midwest Revenue Group. So the website is Midwest Rev, as in revenue, MidwestRev.com. Great.
Well, I will link to all of your social media on the show notes, and I hope everyone will look up John, learn a little bit from him. He's putting out a ton of free and amazing content. He's a true giver, and I'm so grateful to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Thank you for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Head over to theinvestormindset.com to join the Insider Club, where we share tools and strategies from the top investors and entrepreneurs on how to take it to the next level.